Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the African American Museum and Library. My name is Marco Frazier, library assistant here. Just a bit about the organization here. We are a research institution that specializes in African American history. We have four departments here. We have a seed lending library, a reference library, an archives department, and a museum gallery. We hope that you enjoyed today's event. And with that, I will transfer this over to our museum curator, Bamadeli Dimerson. Unmute, please.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, good afternoon. My third time starting. Thank you everyone for joining us today at the African American Museum and Library at Oakland in Northern California. We are very pleased that you have joined us today for today's gallery talk and this curator's talk, a gallery talk, and it is titled Mother, Artist, Healer, Warrior, Woman as Metaphor in Paintings by John Onye Lockhart. This is one of our Women's History Month program. In fact, the exhibition went up shortly around the time of his birthday, which was late January. So we had it up for the month of January. For the month of February, Black History Month, and it will be up through May of this year. It is an online exhibition, so please join us. Let me say thank you, especially to Leslie Camel, the widow of John Lockhart, and she is also the president of the John Onye Lockhart Foundation. So I want to say thank you to the foundation and also to Miko Preston, who searched and photographed each of the images that are in today's presentation and that are in the exhibition and the forthcoming exhibition catalog. And I also want to thank Akili Simba, who designed the exhibition, who designed the online exhibition, and he's designing the forthcoming catalog as well. And I should say that it has been I was very proud of Akili because he also received commendation for the design of the exhibition, the online exhibition that is in that is on view now at the museum. And so with that, I'm going to get started.
Well, I got in.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Leslie, for being here. Yes, you are here.
Thank you for having me and for doing the exhibition.
Thank you. All right. So the first slide is up. You know, as things would happen, you know, when you're trying to organize and I have probably 2 or 3 sets of this slides, and I also have I had text and photographs with those, and unfortunately, some of the slides were did not come through, or there were technical difficulties. But again, this exhibition is titled Mother, Artist, Healer, Warrior, Woman as Metaphor in Paintings by John Onye Lockhart. And so we see one of the paintings, and we will come to this shortly, but we see one of the paintings that's featured in the exhibition, and it's also the cover of the catalog. Now, let me start by letting you know who John Lockhart is. He was born in 1932, and in 2015 he made his ascent toward ancestorhood. He was a noted throughout his life. He was a noted portraitist. He was also an adept illustrator and a consummate muralist. But he was one of America's foremost visual artists. He adhered to the tenets of social realism, and his body of works included narrative drawings rendered in oil, pastels, Conte crayons, and compressed charcoal, as well didactic paintings executed in oils and acrylics. Lockhart taught at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and Washtenaw Community College in that same city. He served as president of the National Conference of Artists, as well as senior advisor to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, which is in Washington, D.C. I want to start by quoting his words. He wrote a poem titled, "I Am an Artist." And in it, from the first stanza reads, "I am an artist, an African-American, and an agent for progress. As such, I am a servant of the Creator, translator for the spirits, visionary, healer, and soother of souls. I am an inventor, therapist, educator, and analyst. I regulate the environment, elevate the consciousness, and civilize the disoriented. I illuminate our history, celebrate our culture, and design our future. I am a diplomat, a politician, an entrepreneur, an activist, an intellectual, a social worker, a minister, an organizer, a builder, a teacher, a crafter, and a problem solver." And so that's the first stanza of this very important poem. And he lets us know that the artist is a multifaceted role. And so therefore, let's look at some facets of this role. Let me state that John was as he was fond of saying, he would always say, "I'm a social realist," which meant that he while he painted portraits and he painted murals and he created illustrations, in the main, he created those images, yet at the same time, they offered a social and political critique of sometimes of the government, sometimes of people in power and their policies, and sometimes those who were part of the elite who the culture barons, as he would often call them, but they were the ones who controlled who were in control of the levers of government and administration in the society in which we live. And so we come to a focus on mothers in his painting. And so this first piece is titled "Interruption." And we see a mother with a somewhat forlorn look on her face, but this intimate moment of her breastfeeding her child has been interrupted. We don't know if it was a noise or someone captured their attention. And so he called it interruption because this moment has been, she has been distracted and the baby has been distracted as well. And so we have to ask, what was this? John often he would create stories to accompany his paintings or his illustrations. In this case, he did not, at least not to my knowledge, or not that he shared that with me, but we have to ask, why does she have this particular countenance? And this work was painted in the 1960s. And at the time, we know that when we think about what was going on in the society, and we don't know whether this is a married woman or whether she is single or if she has to raise this child by herself. If this is the latter case, and the interesting thing about John's works is that they are open to interpretation, but he leaves you sometimes to fill in the blanks so that you can express your concern about or your ideas about what's going on and what's behind the story. And so as we look at this, we're reminded that in the 60s, to receive assistance, and let's say, for example, if this woman is receiving some assistance, some meager dollars from the federal government, to do so in the 60s, no household could have a resident male in the role of husband and father. And so in one sense, state and local governments were in fact tearing families apart, as was done during the period of slavery. At the same time, in the 60s, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a sociologist at Harvard University, and later he was a senator, wrote this scathing, or what came to be considered a scathing commentary or a scathing study. He titled The Negro Family, A Case for a National Action. And this was the title of a slim volume published by the Department of Labor. And Moynihan, in so many words, accused mothers of being domineering. And in part, that was a problem facing particularly facing the African-American populace. And so we understand why it was necessary, or why Lockhart found it important to offer critiques of what was going on in the society. And so when we look at this, we don't know if what the source of her distraction is, why the child has also been distracted. But as we continue, we see this is a painting. It's an illustration for a children's book, Ebony C, by Irene Small. This illustration is called You Holds Me and I'll Holds You. And it's the story of Ebo's Landing. Now, some people say Ebo's Landing is really in South Carolina. Some people say it's in Georgia. And many of the sea islands lay claim to being the site of Ebo's Landing. So it's an important story in the popular imagination of the Gullah Geechee people. And so as the story goes, in the late 19th century, when it was illegal to import Africans directly from the continent of Africa, cargo would continue to arrive. And there was this one ship that arrived, and in many stories, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself, because we'll come back to Ebo's Landing again, because we have some other illustrations from this story. But in this particular story, the Africans protested once they got off the ship by walking right back into the sea, or walking back into the water, and saying that they were going home. And the little boy who made this voyage with them in the hold of a ship, the dank, dark, musky hold of a ship, was shrieking and crying out, no, no. He was telling everyone, don't go back. Yet they did so. And an elderly woman, Aunt Louisa, stepped forward to calm him down. And so she holds him and she says, you know, there are only 2 or 3 things in this world that happen. And you can live or you can die. And she said, it's nothing wrong with living. And so she tries to comfort him while they are headed back into marching back into the sea. And so in this case, we see an elderly woman taking the role of mother to comfort a young child, a person that she might very well rear. In this situation, he was orphaned. He didn't have his parents there with him. He was there alone, and everyone marched back in the sea. And so she stepped forward to hold him. And so we see the backstory is as important as the painting, knowing the story of Ibo's Landing. When we look at this next painting is titled, I'm gonna raise this one myself. And when we look at this, we have to think what was going on in the late 80s and the early 90s. There was the crack epidemic that took hold in American cities. Here is a woman who had raised her children, never had any problems with them, but yet one of her adult children had succumbed to the issue of drugs. And so she had to make the decision. Was she going to trust her adult child to raise this son, or was she going to do it herself? And so she resolved that she would do this herself. I'm going to raise this one myself. And she's holding in her hand, her arm is supportively around him. And at the same time, she's holding sheet music. John saw the holy number. And, you know, this is a spiritual. This was a gift. These are Xerox copies that are attached to the painting, or collage to the painting. But the original score was a gift of Eva Jesse, who was a choral director during the Harlem Renaissance period. And she, in her senior most year, she moved to Ann Arbor and she taught at the University of Michigan, where she was a colleague of John. And so John was honoring her because she edited and arranged this this version of the song, or this rendition of the song. And so we see again, as we saw with Aunt Louisa during the period of slavery, we see that in the modern day era, we see elders raising children, and they are in the role of mother. And so we come to this painting. It's titled Detroit, Soweto, Pietà. Now, if you're familiar with Michelangelo's Pietà, you're familiar with the idea of which is in the Vatican in Rome. We have all seen images of the Virgin Mary cradling the lifeless body of her son after he had been taken down from the cross. And so this is and remember, the execution of Jesus Christ had taken place with government approval. And so when John created this work, he called it Detroit, Soweto, Pietà. And what is the relationship between Soweto and Detroit? Both were majority Black cities. yet both were cities that were ensconced in a society that had a racial hierarchy that was intent on taking the lives of so many. We see that she is dressed in her African attire. She has a headdress that is emblazoned with a cowrie shell. She has a green patterned triangular pattern dress with triangles. And she's wearing her beads and her armlet on her upper arm. And so she's announcing that she is a cultural worker. And so she believes in her Africanity. And so whether you are in Detroit or whether you are in the Southwest African Township or Soweto, both are cities with majority Black populations, but both are in societies that where racial caste structure is so significant. And so John is raising an issue for us to examine. You'll notice that that the mother is facing, and the life-giving son is tearing apart. We see the yellow the yellow predominates in the sun that is at the set of concentric circles at the bottom, and then the oranges predominate in the concentric circles upper. But the life-giving sun is pulling apart before her very eyes. And in some ways, John also is making a pun. Her son is deceased, and the life-giving son appears to be dying before her eyes as well. And so we have to raise the question, is our Africanity enough to sustain us? And again, I stated that she is a cultural worker. She's announcing this so by her dress. But in the Southwest African Township, as well as in Detroit, you have a number of people who are engaged in cultural work, and that's important and it should continue. But what other things must necessarily be in place to ensure the perpetuity of life for African Americans, and specifically for males? And so, I forgot to say, if you have any questions or any comments, please stop me and raise a question or a comment, or if you wish to take issue with anything that I've said, please do so on the slide. You don't have to wait until I get to the end of the lecture to raise any questions. And so we see a complex set of stories. We have to say, why does the mother have the forlorn look on her face? Then we have to say, look at the adoptive mother. In this case, a person who's trying to comfort a young boy who has now lost everyone that he possibly knew. Who marched back into the sea. We have her grandmother figure raising her grandchild. And here we have a mother who has raised her son, but must deal with the sorrow of burying her son. And so pietà means pity. And so it is indeed a pity that we live in societies where the state might even sanction the death. And so the question that's required of us is, what will we do to make the necessary changes? So then we focus on women as artists. And so this work was created in the late 80s, because approaching 1990, the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor was going to observe the 20th anniversary of the BAM strikes, the Black Action Movement. These were strikes that took place on campus that had that were intent on closing the university until it made a commitment to make changes in the admission of African American students to the school as well. It was Michigan's premier university, or its flagship institution of higher education, but by and large, African Americans were excluded from that. The artists wanted to create a symbol of belonging. And if you've been in Michigan, you know that those winters can be a little bit severe. And so he used the idea of a quilt to convey that sense of belonging, because we know that quilts were often created in certainly in the older days by bits and pieces of cloth that had been recycled from used clothing, draperies, and other items. And so you would have to those would be recycled and fashioned. The scraps would be fashioned into a work of beauty that was also functional and very warm, because it was a quilt. But notice how he created, in creating this quilt, and I'm moving my cursor, we have the Ankh, which means the perpetuity of life. We have the Aya, the fern, among a symbol among the Adinkra people, which has reference to independence, because this particular fern, as grown in Ghana, can survive in a very parched environment. We have here the conjoined crocodiles, meaning that another Adinkra symbol. We shouldn't fuss over the who gets the food, because we share the same stomach. So it's a symbol of unity. And then the Jenyame, the omnipotence of God, meaning that I am second, or I fear only God, that no one is before me. So even in a society such as the Akan people, where there was a hierarchy, or in this society where there is a racial hierarchy, we are all equal before God. And of course, we have the peace symbol, and we have the block M, which is maize on a blue field, which is a symbol for the University of Michigan itself. And so we have this connection to Africa created in this quilt, in addition to the scraps and pieces of cloth. Just one second, please. And so one of the things that's interesting, that this then becomes a strip quilt. And while he created this as a work of art, and we see the mother, or the mother and her husband holding the quilt together, she was the one who created this, the artist, in this case, the master craftswoman who created this work, but she created it in a way that is reminiscent of African textile traditions. Now, on the one hand, John has, excuse me, has emblazoned the quilt with the ankh, the fern, the akoma, the conjoined crocodile, and some other symbols. But at the same time, he has created this as a stripped quilt. And it reminds us of the stripped textiles found in West Africa. You know, the kente cloth is woven, and then it's sewn edge to edge. It's woven in in narrow bands, and the narrow bands are then sewn edge to edge to form the larger piece of cloth. And so in this case, he's reminding us that African women, or African American women, have carried forth their inheritance of a aesthetic vision from the continent of Africa. And so this quilt becomes far more than, as Du Bois would say, W.E.B. Du Bois would say, a work of art is far more than a work of art. It is the spirit that knows beauty, that has the color of sunset in its headkerchief, that can dance on a flaming sword and make the world dance too. And he ended that passage by saying, such is the soul of the Negro. And so when we look at works of art, he has taken what would be considered a work of folk art, and he has stated that this is indeed, we should honor this as art, this master craftswoman who has created this work. Then we have Lift Every Voice. And we know this is the title of the song by James Weldon Johnson, and the music was composed by Rosamond Johnson, his brother. And so you see the five women, and so we know that they will be sopranos, mezzo-sopranos, possibly contraltos, altos, and I'm trying to think of the various parts. The sopranos, the contraltos, the mezzo-sopranos, and together they're each singing a different part, but are harmoniously blending their voices. And so we know that Lift Every Voice and Sing is the Black national anthem. We recall the poem consists of 3 verses. Johnson conveyed a people's determination to rejoice in the liberty achieved over the course of an epic journey through enslavement. Bonded servitude was indeed a gloomy past, filled with a stony pathway, weary feet, tears, blood of the slaughtered, and the annihilation of the unborn hope. And while Johnson captured the hallmarks of a people's dispossession during a period of captivity, he also expressed a sense of optimism of people determined and intent on, quote, facing the rising sun, our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. And so this painting, you know, when standing before it, you can almost hear them singing. And so the other artist that John gives attention to is the poet. This work is titled, Her Words Were Like Jewels, Jewels, that sparkled from her lips. And notice again, we have the concentric circles that serve as the sun. And so in this piece, we're reminded that when John was a professor at the University of Michigan and at Washington Law Community College, he taught survey courses in art history, and he taught also life drawing. But in his survey courses, he also emphasized that while we were dealing with visual art, he also focused on those who were engaged in dance, those who were engaged in poetry, those who were writing stories, those who were composing music. And so one of the artists that he would always mention would be Margaret Walker. He also mentioned Gwendolyn Brooks, Sonia Sanchez, and Mari Evans. He valued the written word, and while he valued the written word, he appreciated the phonesthetics entailed in a recitation. He listened attentively for euphony, phraseology, intonation, cadence, and wordplay. And he also appreciated the gesturing that went along with the recitation of a work of poetic art. And so I'm reminded specifically of the poem by Margaret Walker, which was read in his class because I was a student of John's. And the poem that we had to read was "We Have Been Believers." And it reads in part, "We have been believers, believing in the black gods of an old land, believing in the secrets of the seers and the magic of charmers." The poem continues and goes on to say, "And the white gods of a new land, and the white gods of a new land, we have been believers, believing in the mercy of the masters. We have been believing, feeding greedy, grinning gods like a Moloch." And so, so we appreciate the words of the poet Margaret Walker. But John also appreciated dance. Excuse me, let me clear my throat. I'm sorry, just 1 second. Are there any questions or any comments? Oh, don't be shy. All right. Well, John also appreciated dance, and particularly the dancer. And the first work to the left is called Life Dance, and to the right is called The Dancer in the Presence of Strength and Beauty. And so one of the things that he was attentive to was the fact that often the dancer had to train and in fact developed an athletic body. And so he portrays this profound sense of athleticism. And so we see a dancer suspended in midair, because we know that the dancer could jump into midair, hold a pose, and seemingly accomplish what seemed to be impossible with the contortions and the movements of her body. And in this case, he's letting you know that the dancer is indeed an athlete. But also, the three dancers that he always mentioned in his class were Carmen de Lavallade, Katherine Dunham, and Pearl Primus. Dunham perhaps expressed best an enduring perspective in the minds of so many artists, whether a quilter, vocalist, poet, or a dancer, or even Lockhart. And Katherine Dunham stated, "We weren't pushing Black is Beautiful. We just showed it." I mean, I think that that's such a beautiful statement. And equally significant, Pearl Primus, an anthropologist and a dancer, raised a rhetorical question that would no doubt resonate with Lockhart's surges in his own creativity. She asked, "Why do I dance?" And her heartfelt response was very simple. Quote, "Dance is my medicine. It is the scream which eases for a while the terrible frustration common to all human beings who, because of race, creed, or color, are invisible. Dance is the fist with which I fight the sickening ignorance of prejudice." End of quote. And I like the statement by Carmen de Lavallade also, who was the wife of Geoffrey Holder, who stated in an instructive manner, she said, quote, Lift your eyes and look at each other. You aren't going to grow if you don't watch people tell their stories, tell your own story. And so we have the dancers that are depicted in Lockhart's art. Um, uh, the As we come to the next section, we're dealing with healers. This one is called mm. And so it's a vocalization. So, I mean, if I were in a class, I would ask you to pronounce it with me. And so sometimes, um, that expression can be used to express astonishment, awesomeness, even bewilderment. But in this painting, we see a plainly dressed woman. She has a head tie, and she displays a pouch suspended from a cord tied around her neck. Now, in the language of the folk language, this was called an aspidity bag, or but it was really filled with asafoetida, which was a resin, and it contained a mixture of other substances, and it produced a very pungent smell. But folk wore it around their necks to prevent colds and respiratory illnesses, high blood pressure, and even pregnancy. And if it had such a pungent odor, I'm sure that it did prevent pregnancy, because nobody would connect with each other. But this was worn. And so it reminds us of John's travels, particularly through the South, and where he made mental notations on the traditions of the folk. And so out of this, we get and the aspidity bag. But also, and so this was part of our hoodoo lore. And we know that hoodoo, some people think of hoodoo as magic, but it was also a medicinal system for those who did not, who were relying on their own traditions, and who perhaps did not have access to the Western medical treatments as well. And so when we think of this, I cannot help but think of also candomblé. John also traveled to South America, and specifically to Bahia, Brazil. And while there, we know that candomblé is a Central African term referring to feasting, drumming, dancing, and merriment. And it referred to the spiritual traditions that were rooted in the African-derived religion practice in Brazil. But here we see a Mãe de Santo, or a devotee of the a mother who was caring for the saints, and in this, or the African name, Iyalache, the mother, the holder of spiritual power, if we use the Yoruba term. But these persons were not only spiritual leaders, but as in the hoodoo practitioner, or the hoodoo doctor, the candomblé priestess was also well-versed in medicinal lore. And so she could make recommendations, and she could make recommendations for curative efficacy. That was very important. And so those who came to the candomblés came there not only for religious purposes or spiritual purposes, but they also came to be healed, or they sought out the spiritual leader for her curative powers. Now we're going to go to the fourth part. We focused on mothers, we focused on artists, and we focused on healers. And the next area would be warriors. Now there are many. John painted um, um, uh, painted many warriors and many different types of warriors. Lockhart honored and praised the warrior who had many guises, but who always had a self-determining spirit. In one case, she was a member of the conscripted armed services of in a West African military tradition. Now, if you now in this particular painting, John called this Dahomean warrior. Now, the people of Dahomey from the 1600s to the early 1900s had a regiment of women. Now, this is a long time ago, and this is long before women's liberation and the fight for women's equality and so forth. And there were a group of women that were first protected the body, that served as the bodyguard for the king. But not only that, they then became a regular unit within the armed services of the people of Dahomey, or Dahomey is now part of the ancient kingdom, is now encapsulated in the modern day nation state of the People's Republic of Benin. And so the way the women dressed was totally different from the depiction in this particular painting. In this particular painting, the artist has relied on, or has put forth, his own creative vision. He has taken artistic license. And so we see the javelin in her right hand, and in her left hand, she's holding the shield, or the shield, which appears to be modeled in some ways on those of ancient Europe. It's gold in color or brass in color. She has the armlet, and she also has a crown. And this crown is actually modeled on the crowns of ancient Egypt. Now, she stands stalwart, and she's also a full-figured woman. But in this case, we don't think of full-figured meaning, we don't think of full-figured and in its equation in Western society with matronly, but not at all. And so and while the female regiments in Dahomey were given a name by the Europeans, they were called Amazons. Now, Amazon was a term that was used in ancient Greek lore for a group, for a warrior race of women. And this was who really did not exist, but except in the popular imagination. And so John did not use that as a title for this work, but instead he called this woman the Dahomean warrior. And rather than using the term Amazon, the terms that the women use for themselves, they refer to themselves, or the people refer to them as our mothers, and the women will also refer to themselves as, we are the Ahosi, or the wives of the king. And so they were symbolically married to the king, but in this case, the crown alludes to their royal or their regal status, but not. But remember, this is a work that where the creative license is important. And so this is a depiction from the continent of his depiction of a theme on the African continent. And so remember, I was telling the story earlier, the story of Ibo's Landing. So these two pieces are titled, or we can use the title, Red Tignon, or to refer to the scarf. Now, in so many of the stories, you know, and we see the ship in the background, my cursor is right at the ship. And so we see these people are following her and following her to another area where they can go into the water. Now, according to the lore, or some versions of the story, a man stepped forward and he led the Igbo people, often spelled EBO, but the more modern spelling is IGBO. And so he led the Igbo people back to the water. But in Irene Small's telling of the story, she featured a woman leading. She stepped forward and she led the people. And according to the folklore from the Sea Islands region or the Gullah region, in their language, they sang, "Water brought us here, and water spirit will take us back home." And so as they sang that song, they had determined that they were not going to be enslaved. So this has been interpreted as a story of resistance to slavery. And so we see that John has painted this, the drum beat, because they marched with a determined cadence. And, you know, we can imagine them singing the song, marching back into what many people said was their watery grave. Now, now this was about 75 people, 75 or so people. A few bodies were recovered, but no other bodies were recovered. And so I said, you know, while there is a story that depends on European empiricism and logic, that yes, they walked into the water and drowned themselves. I said, but we must remember that the story is that they were intent on going home, and they thought that they could traverse the water, and that the water spirit would see them back home. And so it's interesting that we can look at and assess different ways of telling this story. Now, so that was the African warrior on American soil. But what about the warrior spirit that was that has been engendered over the course of many, many years, even from the time of slavery? And so we're all familiar with Aunt Jemima. And so John has rendered Aunt Jemima on the pancake box with a stern face. She doesn't have the toothy grin that earlier boxes and images of Aunt Jemima had. And although we see the fluffy pancakes with the butter and the syrup, notice that she's wearing the red, black, and green, the tricolors of Africa that have been given to us by Marcus Garvey. And at the same time, we are told in the lower right-hand corner that the net weight of this box is 1,000 pounds. And in the upper left corner with the perforated edge, we say that it says, "Open at your own risk." And so as we look at this particular box, we see the fist punching through the box. She is determined to free herself of the stereotype that confines her to white America's kitchens. And so, so the warrior can even be a stereotype that has been turned back on the society to take a look at itself and say, you know, and so Aunt Jemima is saying, a stereotype no more. And so she is one who fights back. And then we have Mary McLeod Bethune. This work is titled No More. Now, Mary McLeod Bethune is the focus of this particular portrait. John called her the Honorable Mary McLeod Bethune, and he gave it the subtitle, Respect, Resist, Involve, Crossroads. She was born in Maysville, South Carolina in 1875. This was 10 years after the end of slavery. So her parents were enslaved people, but she had an interest in going to school, learning, but she wore many hats. She was an educator. She was an organizer of a girls' school. She was an author, a civil rights activist. She was also the advisor to a few presidents of the United States of America. She founded a hospital. She was a suffragette. She was a businesswoman. She was a U.S. emissary. And she was the president of an institution of higher education, and that is Bethune-Cookman College in Daytona Beach, Florida. And so when we look at Mrs. Bethune, we are reminded of her words. At the 1935 founding of the National Council of Negro Women in New York, she issued the following words, quote, "It is our pledge to make a lasting contribution to all that is finest and best in America, to cherish and enrich her heritage of freedom and progress." Moreover, Bethune promised to work for, quote, "work for the integration of all her peoples, regardless of race, creed, or national origin, into her," meaning America's, "spiritual, social, cultural, civic, and economic life, and thus aid her to achieve the glorious destiny of a true and unfettered democracy." And so Mary Bethune is the educator who trained thousands and who benefited thousands from her vision to seek education. And so the legacy that she left them was indeed the thirst for education, the thirst for life, the thirst for progress. And so the final image that we have is called The Transition of Diane. This is a piece that that John created several years ago. It looks like it's from the 1960s, but here you'll notice two bodies: a lighter one with long flowing hair, and and the darker image rendered in tones of umber with shortly cropped hair. Now, the transition of Diane is a story about a woman who has come to accept and understand herself, and she is at war with colorism in her community, her ethnic community. And this colorism is very much so related to the racial caste color constructs in American society. And so she's coming forward, and notice that to the right of the painting is the Ankh again, which is a favorite symbol, the perpetuity of life that Lockhart used in so many of his paintings. But she's coming forth with a bold, strident move, and she's leaving behind her desire to be something other than herself. This is a painting about self-acceptance, self-understanding, and a valuing of the Black phenotype or the Black physiognomy. We know that non-acceptance of this, which is what she was fighting against, was a devaluation in her assessed beauty, the social opportunities that would perhaps not be extended to her, even hiring practices, and even marriage. And so all of this were factors of that came into play. And so this piece is titled "The Transition of Diane." And so color stratification is a scourge among many living in Black communities in the United States today. Let me conclude by saying that John's works are significantly based on the principle of Sankofa. And when we think of Sankofa, Sankofa is a term found in Ghana among the Akan people, which means step back and fetch it. Not only step back, fetch it, but bring it forward. And it is okay to use the past in constructing the bright tomorrows that we want to, that we wish to create for ourselves. The paintings selected for this exhibition demonstrate that the artists indeed look back at what has propelled and bedeviled Black people over the course of many years. Learning from the past, he certainly looked forward, building bright tomorrows. Lockhart saw the glorious perpetuity of his people. He would acknowledge, and as he would acknowledge, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Oh, and as he would acknowledge, this was indeed a destiny that yet to be achieved. And indeed, the title of his business was Visions of Destiny. And so he painted the idea of looking to the past, but he was painting, and his paintings were in part rooted in the past, but they were rooted in the future. They were rooted in the destiny of a people. Women play a leading role in all facets of cultural being and the cultural transformation. Lockhart had depicted her many times in his works of art. He particularly has portrayed her as mother, artist, healer, and warrior. And in doing so, he has given us a baptism in Black history, Black culture, and the Black aesthetic. This great painter still calls us to action. He wants us to live a resounding life more fully each day. And with an inspiriting gust for living, he loudly proclaimed in the last stanza of that poem, "I am an artist." And he stated, "I am an artist. I invite you to write your own play, sing your own song, paint your own pictures, wear your own clothes, speak your own words with your own voice, dance your own rituals, celebrate your own life, and to be the real you rather than the who you think you are. Be an artist." And so I would tell each of you to be an artist. And you don't have to be a painter to be an artist, but we can be artists, and we should look as he did with the eyes of a social realist. We should be concerned with critiquing the society in which we live and making it a better place for everyone. I want to thank you for joining the African American Museum and Library today. I'm glad that this is going to be, this has been recorded, so people will be able to go online and consult this presentation. But I want to say thank you so much. Would any of you like to have any words? Leslie, you know I'm going to call on you.
Yes, I did. I was trying to type something in the chat. But I'm so slow with this technology. You'd think I'd have it down pat after this many years, but I don't. I just want to thank you for going ahead and doing this presentation. I learned so much from you because I spent 31 years with John, but not necessarily talking about what his paintings were about. At first, we worked on his business, and the last few years we worked on trying to keep him alive and being able to be functional at the same time. So, but I always learned so much from listening to you about these paintings and about history, about African history. I would agree that he wants all of us to contribute. He was very, I think I said this the other day, he was proud of who he was. He was proud of where he came from. He was proud of the contributions that he made to try to have a more equitable, just, and peaceful world, which we don't seem to be living in at all. But
we can try.
but we can try. And I have to say that even though I'm retired, I'm extremely busy because I'm on many boards dealing with trying to change what's going on in this world, and working on the elections and trying to learn social media to get the appropriate information out, not the nonsense and disinformation, and working on resettling immigrants that come into this country, just as my forefathers came in. So thank you very much. I don't know that helps you at all.
Oh, it most certainly does. Thank you. Paula. Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
Come on, Paula. Don't go away. Come on, Paula.
Unmute. Was in the
Putting
chat.
your hand over there isn't helping.
I was trying to type in the yeah. So I was writing in the chat the Dinka symbols and their meanings. So many of us don't know that. Now, would that be considered African proverbs?
They were African proverbial sayings, yes. But I state that these were graphic symbols, and it was a proto-writing tradition, an early writing tradition. And so, because these proverbs, these Adinkra symbols, encapsulated proverbs or conveyed proverbs, and people understood them, and so the cloth could speak, and so folk knew what depending on which symbol was stamped on the cloth, then or which combination of symbols, then the cloth could say different things. And the ideograms were also the same design, were the different designs that were woven into kente cloth as well. And so those were also, that's also a cloth that speaks, because each of those design patterns means something differently. And so you are connected with the sister cities and with our sister city in Ghana, which is Takoradi.
Yes.
And so I mean, and I know that you knew that the Adinkra symbols had meanings, but
I
uh,
didn't know
but
that.
I describe it as a proto-writing tradition. Uh,
Wow.
and and so it's a form of writing. And so when people say, well, Africa is a pre-literate society, I
Hmm.
said that's not quite accurate, but I understand what you're saying, but for those who do so, but it's one of our ancient writing systems.
And our children, they don't know that. Now, what about the other symbols? The who are they? Uh, from South Africa.
Oh, okay.
The Urba.
Oh no, the Yoruba in
Oh,
West Africa.
you. Excuse me for the
Yeah, the
pronoun.
Yoruba, they're in Nigeria.
They're in Nigeria. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and the Yoruba had,
Yoruba.
yeah, Yoruba. The Yoruba had uh,
IOU.
different graphic symbols, but not they're not as popular as the um, uh,
Adinkra.
as the Adinkra from the Akan. But the Yoruba had other
Ah,
kinds of symbols and as well that were included in their art, as well as the Igbo, who had the Uli designs. And so, and John appreciated the Uli designs. He appreciated the
oh, the designs.
Adinkra
Yeah.
symbols. He appreciated the Bamoon script because in one of his murals at Wayne State University, he included the Bamoon script
Wow.
from the Cameroon as well. And so he was very much so interested in reifying African indigenous writing traditions.
Oh my goodness, where will I start? Because our children, they have no idea of any of this. Would the African American Museum have any things, particularly on the symbols from the Ghana or any other parts of Africa? Because I want them to know the African proverbs. They don't understand that language.
Yes. You know what? Let me state that the book that you all are supporting, um,
Yeah,
and this is the Kwame Nkrumah's Midnight Speech for Independence by
yeah,
Usaini Eugene Perkins. If
yes.
you'll notice, Adinkra symbols are on every page of this book,
Every page.
every page.
I saw
And
just the last. Okay, thank you for
but
sharing.
it's found in the designs of um, say for example, uh, look at the collar of his shirt. It
Yes.
has a Dinkra
Oh my
symbol.
God.
And
Yes.
so on the next page, um, or on another page,
No.
uh, let's see. Oh, the woman's um, the woman's hat
Oh no. I have
has the
that. Wow.
Jinyame. And so
Uh-huh.
these are found throughout the illustrations of this book. And so when I saw that, I said, oh, this is so valuable.
Yeah.
And
It's
and
on
so
the inside cover. It's on the inside cover, and also, and
yes, and look at
that's the
her
only
head
place I
tie.
saw it. Oh my goodness.
And
Wait till I
so
tell them.
and so there is a so there is a um, there is at the back of the book, there are the Adinkra symbols and their meanings.
Yes.
Um,
I saw that. Uh-huh.
uh,
I have that.
so
Yes.
so I'm very grateful that you all have moved forward with supplying many of us with this book, and we've ordered a copy for the museum and library as well.
Okay, well, I got to send you an email because they want you to actually help us with the library literacy program in Africa. The thing that they're asking is that what would be 15 books that we all should have in our personal library? So I want to email that to you. The other thing
Okay.
is that to speak of the book, they're saying that that book is for ages 5 to 8 years old. I said, wait a minute. I gave it to my son who's 40, my
Yeah.
grandson who's 10 years old, and to you
And
and to Brenda.
I'm in my 70s. So
Oh, me too.
and so it
who
was
would-
it was
yeah.
a good read. So
And so that's why I'm gonna send you an email. So they really want, and because of your children's story, are you gonna just put it in your children's story catalog, or we gonna? Because no one knows all this.
yeah, we're going to feature it as one of our children's stories as well.
Okay, because she said from 5 to 8 years old. I said, well, I'm 10 times that. What are we gonna do?
Yes,
Okay.
but I'm learning from it as well.
I'm
So-
learning from it as well. That's, you know, like I said, once an adult, twice a child. We really need this book. And so, and then our children, you know, all this is not in the history. And so that's why I was telling them I was quite surprised that we just called it a children's book.
Mhm.
But I was
Well-
so fascinated about the pictures by John. It's just fascinating. I'm so glad you put this online so we can go back and review and refer to everyone about.
Oh,
these
yes, and
beautiful-
please let me say,
Mhm.
please also go and look at the online exhibition.
Okay.
And believe it or not, even though it has only been up for a few weeks, we've also received a citation or
Oh,
so, as an online exhibition
Mhm.
Okay.
through ArtSpace. And so I'm so pleased.
art space.
Mhm.
It
Okay.
is beautiful. It is
Ah.
absolutely beautiful the way it's put together.
Absolutely.
Oh, well,
Absolutely.
thank you, Leslie. Thank you.
Would you like me to send a copy of Ebony C for the library?
Oh, yes, because we don't have a copy here.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'll put it in
And-
the box I have for you, a bunch of
Okay.
stuff.
And Ebony C is the story that John illustrated of Ebo's Landing with
Oh.
this figure, and this is the story of Ebo's Landing as well.
Oh my God.
And
That's a
so-
beautiful
And
story.
so, so he was not only a painter, he was an illustrator.
Absolutely.
And so he illustrated children's books as well.
Oh.
So
Can we get a
all-
list of those children's books? Or is there a picture book or anything? Or can we get a list of his children's books? Because that's one of the things that I would
Wha-
love to continue.
Okay, he only illustrated one
one.
children's book, but
Uh-huh.
or I should say he illustrated two, but only one was published.
Oh, I see.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you. so
Debbie,
much.
how are you?
see a picture of
Saraswati. So, okay, well, Randy, would you like to make a comment?
You have a quiet group.
Okay, well, thank you. Let me say thank you all so very much. This was an important exhibition for me, and I have known John for more than 50 years. And he also taught me, and he served as a mentor to me. And I'm
Mm.
just so pleased that we were able to have his exhibition online here. I mean, I wish we could have it in, the actual pieces in
Oh my God.
in person, but I'm pleased that we are nevertheless able to share and present his work and move forward. And I will be so pleased when the exhibition catalog is completed, because then we will have a small publication.
Oh.
So that we're working on that as well. We're almost through. I have to add a few more footnotes, and we'll be ready to send it to press.
Mm, mm, mm. Thank you.
So let me say thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon. And
Thank you for
again,
that.
let me say, we appreciate you coming to Mother, Artist, Healer, Warrior, Woman as Metaphor in Paintings by John Onye Lockhart.
Thank you. Is this PowerPoint available online?
It will be by way of the recorded, this recorded
Okay.
session will be available. But this session is, oh, you have the images to create the PowerPoint.
Yes, I do, but I don't have the ability to display it as nicely as you did.
We can do that.
Well, this is I can send you the I can send you the PowerPoint presentation so that
Oh,
you
I
can
would
have
love
it.
it. I would love
Okay,
that.
well, I will
Thank
do
you.
that. Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, let me say
Okay.
thank you, everybody, for
Thank you.
coming today. And we will be in continual communication.
Okay.
All right, thank you.